The dust storm struck without warning, rolling across the road between Durango and Silverton like a great brown wall of God's own making. The year was 1893, and the silver crash had left these parts meaner than a rattlesnake in August. Eleanor Roosevelt. Though she went by Ellie Quinn these days, clung to the back of the mail wagon with fingers gone white from gripping. She'd paid her last dollar to the driver for this ride, and now that dollar seemed wasted as the wagon lurched sideways, fighting the wind. The rope holding the mail sack snapped like a gunshot. Canvas bags tumbled down the sandy slope, letters scattering like autumn leaves in the devil's own wind. Ellie cursed a proper curse learned from miners, not the gentle oaths of Eastern ladies, and let go of the wagon. Better to save the mail than her pride. The driver didn't even slow down, probably couldn't see her through the dust anyway. She slid down the embankment, sand filling her boots, her mouth, her eyes. The world had turned yellow-brown, the sun just a dim coin overhead. She grabbed for the mail sacks, stuffing letters back with hands that shook from more than cold. That's when she heard the horse. A rider emerged from the storm like something from a dime novel, tall in the saddle, bandana across his face. Thomas Edison Mercer Cole, to anyone who knew him, had been heading to town when he saw the woman fighting the wind for scattered papers. He swung down from his mare, intending to help. Ellie saw the bandana, the way he moved toward the mail sacks, and didn't think twice. She grabbed the nearest bag and hurled it at his head. "Get your thieving hands off Uncle Sam's mail." Cole ducked, caught off guard. The bag burst open against a juniper bush, adding more letters to the chaos. "Lady, I'm trying to—" "I got eyes, I can see what you're trying." She threw another bag, this one catching him square in the chest. The wind chose that moment to die down, like nature itself wanted a better view of the ridiculous scene. They stood there in the sudden quiet, him holding a mail sack to his chest like a shield, her panting with another bag raised overhead. Sand settled around them in little drifts. "Ma'am," Cole said slowly, pulling down his bandana to reveal a face that hadn't seen a razor in days but held honest eyes. "I ranch up on Animas Creek, was just trying to help." Ellie lowered the bag, feeling foolish heat rise in her cheeks. Before she could form an apology, the wind kicked up again, worse than before. She stumbled backward, arms windmilling, and tumbled straight into the emergency water trough beside the railway shed. The water was brown with rust and algae, cold enough to steal her breath. She came up sputtering, hair plastered to her head like river weeds. Cole moved without thinking, hauling her out with hands that knew hard work. They stood there dripping him from the splash. Her from the dunking, and the absurdity of it hit them both. But neither laughed. Out here, laughter could crack you open when you were already running on empty. "You always this friendly to folks trying to help?" Cole asked, shaking water from his hat. "You always sneak up on women like some penny dreadful villain." Ellie shot back, wringing out her skirts. They glared at each other, two people too tired and too proud to back down. Then Ellie's shoulders sagged. The fight went out of her like air from a punctured bellows. 3 months, she said, so quiet he almost missed it. 3 months since I had a proper bath. Been saving every cent for... Doesn't matter now. She laughed, bitter as alkali water. Guess this counts. Something shifted in Cole's expression. He'd known hard times, knew the weight of them, instead of pity, which would have sent her running. He did something unexpected. He laughed not at her, but at the whole mess of it, and stepped close. "Well then," he said, "let me welcome you proper to the territory." The kiss was hungrier than either expected, tasting of dust and desperation and something else, hope. Maybe, though neither would have called it that. It was the kiss of two people who'd forgotten gentleness could exist, remembering it all at once. When they broke apart, both looked stunned. A train whistle shrieked across the desert. Cole's head snapped up, recognizing trouble. Men were unloading crates from a freight car, and he knew those faces, Silas Rockefeller's boys, who ran the mines and worse, The crates were marked with red paint danger explosives. "We need to move," Cole said. "Those men see a woman alone out here." Ellie's spine straightened. She'd dealt with their kind before, in mining camps from Colorado to here, but she was tired of running, tired of fighting. When Cole offered his hand up to his horse, she took it. They rode hard toward the hills, the storm chasing them like it had business to finish. Cole's line cabin sat on a shelf of rock above the valley, built solid from pine logs chinked with mud. By the time they reached it, they could barely see 10 feet ahead. Inside, Cole worked on the fire while Ellie tried to shake the sand from her hair. The small space filled with the smell of burning pine pitch and the promise of coffee. She caught her reflection in a cracked mirror and had to laugh. She looked like something the cat dragged in and the dog wouldn't eat. "Stew's nothing fancy," Cole said, not looking at her. "But it's hot." They ate in careful silence, two wary animals sharing a den. Finally, Ellie started talking about her father's failed claim, the company store that took everything, the traveling medicine show she'd worked to escape worse situations. She didn't mention the night in Denver when a drunk foreman cornered her, or how she'd learned to keep a knife in her boot after that. Cole listened, adding wood to the fire when it burned low. His own story came out in pieces: the mine explosion, the friend who didn't make it out, the bottle he'd crawled into until he'd nearly drowned. The cabin still held signs of his attempts at normal life: half-carved wooden toys, sheet music for songs he'd never learned, a framework for a cradle that would never hold a child. Outside, the storm howled like all the demons of the desert had united for one last dance. But inside the cabin, something fragile and unexpected began to grow. Not trust exactly, but the possibility of it. Two broken people finding shelter not just from the storm, but from the loneliness that had carved them hollow as old bones. As the night deepened, they made a simple bargain: she'd cook and help with the cattle in exchange for a roof and walls between her and the world. Neither mentioned how her eyes kept checking the window, or how his hand stayed near the rifle by the door. In the West, you learn to sleep light or not wake up at all. But for now, for tonight, the storm was outside and they were in. The fire crackled. The coffee pot whispered on the stove, and two souls who'd forgotten how to hope began to remember what it felt like. Eleanor Roosevelt Quinn had been born in Leadville when it was still booming, back when silver flowed like water and men thought the good times would never end. Her mother died birthing her, leaving her father Benjamin to raise a daughter in a town full of saloons and smelters. He'd been a good man once, before the bottle got him. The Sisters of Mercy taught her letters when her father forgot to send her to school, and she'd stolen knowledge from a dusty bookshop where the owner was too nearsighted to notice a small girl reading in the corners. When the mine started laying off men, Benjamin Quinn was among the first to go. His hands shook too much for steady work. Ellie had been 15 then, old enough to wash dishes at Mother Florence's boarding house, young enough that men looked at her in ways that made her skin crawl. She learned to move quick, talk sharp, and keep a hat pin where she could reach it fast. The medicine show had seemed like salvation when it rolled through town. "Doctor, Hamilton's Miraculous Remedies needed a girl to help mix tonics and dance a little between acts. Nothing improper," the doctor assured her. Just enough ankle to keep the farmers buying. She'd lasted 8 months before a customer decided he'd paid for more than cough syrup. That night in the alley behind the tent, she'd fought like a wildcat and run like the devil was chasing her. Maybe he was. She'd learned to shoot from Victoria Woodhull, though the dance hall girl called herself Sally, who kept a pearl-handled .32 in her garter. "Men respect 2 things," Sally had told her: cold steel and hot lead. You show 'em both, they'll usually remember their manners. Ellie practiced until she could hit a playing card at 20 paces, though ammunition was dear and her aim suffered for want of bullets. The rest she'd learned on the road: how to mend clothes with thread pulled from flour sacks, how to make a filling meal from beans and pepper when there was nothing else, how to read a man's intentions in the set of his shoulders. Her hands grew calloused from work, her feet tough as leather from walking. She carried the West's dust in her lungs and its wariness in her bones. Thomas Edison Mercer Cole to everyone but his mother. God rest her, had taken a different path to the same hard place. His people had farmed along the Animas River when the valley was still more Mexican than American. He'd grown up breaking horses and mending fences, learning the rhythms of the land like other boys learned their prayers. The mines had drawn him like they drew everyone promises of steady wages and a future that didn't depend on rain. He'd started as a mucker, hauling ore, but his steady hands and careful nature had moved him up to powder monkey. Setting the charges that blasted through mountain granite? He'd been good at it, maybe too good. Started thinking he could read the rock like reading a book, know just where to place the dynamite for a clean break. Pride goeth before a fall. And Cole's fall had come on a Tuesday morning in 1891. The fuse had burned too fast or too slow, he never knew which. All he knew was that William Carnegie, his partner, was still in the drift when the mountain came down. They'd dug for 3 days before they found what was left. Cole had helped carry the body out, then walked away from the mines and never looked back. The bottle had called to him the way it called to many men who'd seen too much. But Cole had watched his own father die of drink, liver sick and mean as a snake at the end. So instead of drowning his ghosts, he'd taken them up into the hills, built his cabin with his own hands, each log a penance, each nail a prayer for forgiveness that never came. He'd tried his hand at normal life, started courting Grace Cleveland from town, a shopkeeper's daughter with soft hands and softer dreams. Even began making furniture for the home they'd have. That half-finished cradle still mocked him from the corner. But Grace had wanted a man who smiled easy and slept sound. Cole woke, screaming William's name often enough that she'd given back his ring with tears and apologies. Now he lived by hauling timber, fixing fences, and running a few head of cattle on shares. He knew every trail for 20 miles, every waterhole, every place a man could ford up if trouble came calling. The mountain had taught him patience, the desert had taught him endurance, and loneliness had taught him that some wounds never heal you, just learn to walk despite the limp. The morning after the storm, Ellie woke to find Cole already gone. Coffee steamed on the stove, biscuits warming in the oven. She found him by the corral, doctoring a mare's split hoof. His hands were gentle as a mother's, though scarred from rope and rock. She stepped wrong in the storm, he explained without looking up. Needs tending or she'll go lame. Ellie watched him work, noting the care he took. You got a name for her? Just Horse. He glanced up, almost smiling. Never saw the point in naming something that might not make it through winter. That's a hard way to live. It's a hard world. She couldn't argue that. Instead, she fetched water and held the mare's head while Cole wrapped the hoof. The horse trembled but stood steady, trusting. When they were done, Ellie ran her hand along the mare's neck, feeling the warmth, the life underneath. Everything deserves a name, she said quietly, even if it doesn't last. Cole studied her, this woman who'd blown in with the storm. Morning light showed the truth of her, the hollow cheeks, the watchful eyes, the way she held herself ready to run. He recognized the signs because he carried them too. You planning on lasting?" he asked. She met his gaze straight on. "I'm planning on trying." That was enough. In the West, trying was all anyone could promise. They went back to the cabin together, and Ellie cooked breakfast while Cole sketched out the day's work. There were cattle to move to water, fences to check, wood to split before the next storm. She'd need boots that fit and clothes that could take the abuse. He'd need to go to town, which meant facing the questions and stares. "I can go alone," Ellie offered, reading his reluctance. "Been facing worse than gossip my whole life." "No." The word came out harder than he meant. "Rockefeller's men are in town. You don't go anywhere alone until we know what they're planning." She bristled at being told what to do, then saw the sense in it. This wasn't about her pride, it was about staying alive. In the West, you learn the difference or you learn too late. They worked out a system she'd handle the cabin and the chickens, help with the cattle when needed. He'd teach her to ride proper, not just hang on and hope. She'd teach him some of the medicine show receipts, legal ones that might bring in extra money. Neither mentioned that this felt like building something together. It was too soon, too fragile for words like that. But when evening came and they sat on the porch watching the sun paint the mountains red, there was a different quality to the silence. Not empty anymore, but full of possibility. The West sprawled before them, hard and beautiful and unforgiving, and they faced it together. For now, that was enough. The morning came cold and silver, frost painting the grass like an old woman's hair. Cole and Ellie moved the cattle down to the river, their breath clouding in the dawn air. The animus ran low and sullen, choked with mind-tailings from upstream. Ellie's fingers turned purple with cold as she helped drive the stragglers, and when a barrel cactus caught her skirt, she let loose a string of curses that would have made a teamster blush. "Son of a—" she caught herself, yanking fabric free from the thorns. Cole pulled out his pocket knife without a word, showing her how to cut the spines at the base. "Angle the blade away from you? These thorns'll fester if you leave even a piece." His hands covered hers, guiding the knife. For a moment they stood close enough that she could smell the leather and wood smoke on him, feel the steadiness that ran through him like bedrock. Then a cow bawled, and the moment broke. They rode into Dry Gulch as the sun climbed toward noon. The town sprawled along a single muddy street, false-fronted buildings leaning against each other like drunks after a spree. The air carried scents of fresh bread from Martha Washington's bakery, axle grease from the freight depot, horse sweat and human misery from everywhere else. Piano music tinkled from the Clementine saloon, mixing with the steady ring of hammer on anvil. Ellie wore Cole's old canvas coat and a hat pulled low, but she still felt the eyes tracking her. In a town this small, a new woman was news. A woman staying with Cole Mercer was gossip. She kept her chin up and her hand near the knife in her pocket. Their first stop was the general store for supplies. Cole introduced her simply as Miss Quinn, which earned him a surprised look from Ellie and a knowing one from the shopkeeper. While Cole negotiated for flour and beans, Ellie drifted to the bulletin board. Among the wanted posters and land sale notices, she found what she was looking for: help wanted Clementine Saloon. "I wouldn't recommend it," a voice said behind her. Ellie turned to find a woman in purple silk, past her prime but carrying herself like a queen. Marie Curie Doucet had run the Clementine for 15 years, and her dark eyes missed nothing. "And why's that?" Ellie asked. "Because Silas Rockefeller's been collecting girls lately. Calls it company employment, but—" Marie's mouth twisted. "Let's just say the contracts aren't what they seem. Once a girl signs, she owes more than she can ever pay back." Ellie's stomach turned. She'd seen that game before in mining camps, company store credit that grew like a cancer, keeping workers trapped, but this was worse. This was selling women like cattle, just with prettier words. "I appreciate the warning," Ellie said carefully. Marie studied her, then nodded toward Cole. "That one's decent. Keeps to himself, but he helped when my roof caved in last winter. Didn't ask for nothing but a meal." She paused. "You running from something, honey?" "Isn't everyone—" Marie's laugh was whiskey rough. "True enough. You need work that won't sell your soul. Come see me. I got dishes that need washing, and a strong back's worth more than a pretty face in my place." Cole appeared at Ellie's elbow, a question in his eyes. She shook her head slightly later. They moved on to the blacksmith, where Diego Vespucci worked a glowing horseshoe. The Mexican man had arms like tree trunks and a smile that split his smoke-darkened face. "Cole, good to see you, friend. And this must be the lady from the storm." News traveled fast in Dry Gulch. Cole didn't deny it, just asked after nails and hinges. While they talked, Diego's eyes kept drifting to the hills. Finally, he set down his hammer. "You seen the new construction upriver?" Diego asked. Voice low. Rockefeller's building something big. Cut my cousin's irrigation ditch last week. Said it was eminent domain. The corn's dying in the field. Cole's jaw tightened. Railroad's backing him. Railroad. Sheriff. Probably the governor for all we know. Diego pulled out a scrap of paper. Sketched quick lines. This is what my cousin saw. Looks like a dam to me. Ellie leaned in, studying the rough map. A dam would mean controlling all the water downstream. In a desert. That was better than gold. It was life and death. They left with more than supplies. They left with knowledge that sat heavy as lead in their bellies. The ride back was quiet, both lost in thought. As they crested the last hill before the cabin, Cole suddenly reined in. You should know, he said, not looking at her. Marie's right. I don't bother anyone, and they mostly don't bother me. But being associated with me won't make your life easier in town. Ellie thought about that, about the way people had looked at Cole, respect mixed with something else. Fear, pity. She thought about her own reputation, already tattered from years of running. You planning on throwing me out? She asked. No. Then I guess we're both stuck with what people think. That night, they set up Target's old cans and bottles on a fence rail. Ellie's hands shook on the first shots, not from nerves, but from hunger for the practice. Cole corrected her stance. Her grip, the way she jerked the trigger instead of squeezing. Breathe out slow, he said. Let the shot surprise you. She missed more than she hit, but each shot felt like reclaiming something. When the ammunition ran low, Cole set up bigger targets. If you're practicing, might as well build confidence too. It was full dark when they quit. The stars scattered across the sky like spilled salt. They worked together to repair the chicken coop, Ellie holding boards while Cole hammered. She told him about helping Martha Cleveland, though she called her Mrs. Hightower in town with kitchen work. $3 a week wasn't much, but it was honest. That's good, Cole said, and meant it. Honest work's worth more than easy money out here. They were fixing the water trough when Cole started talking about the mine. Not the explosion that was still too raw, but the daily fear. The way a man could start his shift whole and end it broken, or not end it at all. I used to light a candle every morning, he said, testing the trough's supports. Stupid superstition, but it felt like insurance. Like if I kept that flame going, I'd make it home. He gave a bitter laugh. The morning William died, I forgot, overslept and rushed out without lighting it. Ellie's hand stilled on the board she was holding. That wasn't your fault. Knowing and believing are two different things. She understood that. How many times had she told herself that what happened in Denver wasn't her fault? That wearing a patched dress didn't mean she was asking for trouble. The mind knew. But the heart carried its own stubborn truths. A young boy appeared at the edge of their light circle. Skinny as a fence post and twice as wary. Jesse James Sullivan had been sleeping in the livery stable, picking up pennies where he could. 12 years old and already marked by the West's hardness. Got any work? The boy asked, chin jutting with false bravado. I'm strong, can lift my weight in feed sacks. Cole and Ellie exchanged glances. Another mouth to feed they didn't have. But Ellie remembered being young and hungry, pride the only thing between her and begging. Can you stack kindling? She asked. The boy's face lit up. Yes, ma'am. Stack it neat as you please. Supper and $1 for a full cord. Cole added, You steal anything, you don't come back. Wouldn't steal, Jesse said fiercely. My ma raised me right before the fever took her. They worked until full dark. Jesse chattering about the town, the mines, the men who came and went. Kids heard everything, ignored like furniture. Through his talk, a picture emerged: Rockefeller bringing in more muscle, the sheriff turning blind eyes for full pockets, families being pushed off land that had been theirs for generations. As they sat down to a late supper of beans and cornbread, Ellie felt something she hadn't expected: contentment, not happiness exactly, but a sense of rightness. The cabin was small and drafty, the food plain, the future uncertain. But Jesse wolfed down his portion with grateful eyes, and Cole's rare smile when the boy made a joke was worth gold. Later, after Jesse had been sent home with his dollar and promises of more work, Ellie stood on the porch looking out at the valley. Somewhere out there, Rockefeller was building his dam, claiming the water, crushing the small folks under his boot heel. "We could leave," Cole said from behind her. "Pack up, head for California or Oregon, start fresh where nobody knows us." Ellie thought about it. The temptation was real as rain, but she'd been running for years. And what had it gotten her? Just more dust and fewer choices. "I'm tired of leaving," she said finally. "Maybe it's time to try staying." Cole moved up beside her, not touching, but close enough she could feel his warmth. "It'll get ugly. Rockefeller doesn't like being crossed." "Then I guess we'd better be ready." The wind kicked up, bringing the scent of sage and distant rain. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote called to its pack. The sound was wild and lonely and fierce, like the West itself, like the choice they were making. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight they had a roof and walls, food in their bellies, and the strange comfort of not facing the darkness alone. In the West, sometimes that was all the fortune a body could ask for. Bad news came with the morning freight wagon. Marie Curie Doucet had been fined $50 for harboring vagrant women, a sum that might as well have been $500 for what she had. The real crime was that she'd given shelter to a girl named Susan Anthony, barely 17, who'd fled from Rockefeller's mining camp after discovering what her housekeeping contract really meant. Cole heard about it at the feed store while buying grain. He found Ellie at Mrs. Hightower's restaurant, elbow deep in dishwater, and pulled her aside. Her face went hard as he told the story. "Where's the girl now?" Ellie asked. "Marie hid her somewhere, but Sheriff Carnegie's tearing the Clementine apart looking for her." Andrew Carnegie wore a badge, but everyone knew Rockefeller owned him down to his boots. The sheriff was a small man who walked tall with borrowed power, the kind who'd break a child's toy just to see tears. He'd brought 3 deputies to search Marie's place, turning over beds and emptying drawers like they were hunting a fugitive killer instead of a scared girl. That night, a soft knock came at the cabin door. Marie stood there with Susan, who looked even younger than 17, hollow-eyed and shaking despite the warm evening. Without a word, Ellie pulled them inside while Cole checked the road. "Can't stay long," Marie said. "They're watching my place, but I remembered what you said about everyone running from something." She looked at Ellie meaningful-like. "Figured you might know about running." Susan barely spoke above a whisper. "They said I owed for transport, clothes, food. Said I'd work it off in 6 months, but the debt kept growing. Other girls told me." She stopped, shuddering. 10 years? Some of them been there. They never let you work it off." Cole's hands clenched. He'd seen debt slavery in the mines, but this was worse. This was selling innocence wrapped in legal paper. "We'll get you to the next town," he said. "Maybe Denver, or—" "No." Ellie's voice cut sharp. "She runs now. There'll be another girl tomorrow, and another after that." She turned to Marie. "How many others?" "4 that I know of, maybe more." They made a plan by lamplight. Cole would guide Susan through the back trails to Telluride, where Marie had a cousin. But first, they needed proof of what Rockefeller was doing, something that would stick even with a bought sheriff. The chance came sooner than expected. 2 nights later, Jesse came running, face purpled with bruises. Rockefeller's men had caught him watching the dam construction. They'd worked him over good, nothing broken, but the message was clear: curiosity could be fatal. Cole lifted the boy's chin, checking the damage. His jaw worked like he was chewing nails. "Who did this?" "Mr. Barnes, and that one they called Dutch. Said next time they'd teach me permanent." Ellie cleaned Jesse's cuts with hands that shook not from fear but rage. This was a child, A boy who stacked kindling for dollar bills and called her ma'am like she was quality. The West was hard, but there were lines. Or there should be. "You're staying here tonight," she said, brooking no argument. "Can't. They'll come looking." "Let them come." Cole's voice was quiet, dangerous. The Cole who'd set mine charges, who understood how to break things down to their foundations. But nobody came that night. Or the next. Rockefeller was too smart for direct confrontation. Instead, word spread through town like wildfire the boy was a thief. The woman was a runaway whore. The man was a killer who'd murdered his partner for gold. Lies with just enough seasoning of truth to make them swallow easy. Mrs. Hightower let Ellie go with apologies and 2 days' wages. "I can't afford trouble," she said, not meeting Ellie's eyes. "Got my own family to think of." Ellie took it without complaint. She'd been let go before, for less reason, but it stung worse this time. Maybe because she'd started to hope. She found night work at the Clementine, not serving drinks but washing dishes and keeping the peace when girls got rowdy. Marie paid fair and asked no questions. The work was hard and the hours long, but it gave Ellie something Cole couldn't access to drunk men's loose tongues. That's how she learned about the books. Samuel Clemens, Rockefeller's bookkeeper, liked his whiskey neat and his conscience drowned. 4 drinks in, he'd mutter about double entries and phantom workers, about water rights bought from dead men and contracts that changed after signing. "Keeps it all in the safe," he slurred one night. "Iron box with a lock from Chicago. Everything that'd hang him in half the territory." Ellie poured him another drink with steady hands. "Must be hard, carrying all those secrets." "Hard," Clemens laughed bitter. "Try impossible. But what choice do I got man's gotta eat?" She waited until he passed out, then lifted his keys careful as a pickpocket. In the wax she kept for waterproofing. She pressed each key, making molds. It was an old medicine show trick. Doc Hamilton had used it to duplicate hotel keys for midnight exits. Cole didn't like it when she told him. They stood in the dark barn, voices low so Jesse wouldn't hear from his bed in the loft. "Too dangerous," he said. "You get caught." "We're already caught." She showed him her hands. The new calluses from lye soap, the old ones from a lifetime of work. Only difference is the size of the cage. He caught her hands, held them. "There's got to be another way, legal way." "You mean like Susan tried, like Jesse's mother probably tried before the fever?" She pulled free, gentle but firm. "Laws for people who can afford it. Cole, rest of us make do with what we got." They compromised, as they were learning to do. Cole would reach out to a lawyer in Durango, someone Marie knew who couldn't be bought. Meanwhile, Ellie would wait, watch, and listen, no rushing in like fools. The weather turned cold, winds sharp as accusations. They moved the cattle closer to the river, where scrub grass still grew. Working side by side, they fell into rhythms, Ellie anticipating which cow would bolt, Cole knowing when she needed help without asking. Partnership, quiet and sure. One evening, Cole started working on something in the barn. Wouldn't say what, just asked Ellie to keep Jesse busy. She taught the boy letters by lamplight, using an old Bible and newspapers for text. The boy was quick, hungry for learning like he'd been hungry for food. "Why'd you name me Jesse James?" the boy asked one night. "My ma called me Tom." Ellie glanced at Cole, who shrugged. They'd had to give him some surname for the doctor who'd looked at his bruises. "Jesse James was complicated," she said finally. "Did wrong things for what he thought were right reasons. But maybe you'll do better. Keep the fighting spirit. Lose the robbing trains." The boy grinned, gap-toothed. "Rather rob Rockefeller anyhow. Trains never hurt nobody." Out of the mouths of babes, but it planted a seed, dangerous as dynamite, because Rockefeller had to ship his silver somewhere, and the railroad had schedules, manifests, papers that showed where money flowed like water finding its level. The night Ellie finally got her chance at the safe. An early winter storm was building. She could taste snow in the air, feel electricity like the world holding its breath. Clemens was drunk as usual, but there was something else a tremor in his hands, sweat despite the cold. "Leaving tomorrow," he mumbled into his glass. "Can't stomach it anymore. They're bringing in more girls, younger ones. I got a daughter that age." Ellie's blood chilled. "When tomorrow?" "Dawn, catching the early freight. If I'm lucky, I'll be in Santa Fe before they know I'm gone." No more time for careful planning. It was tonight or never. She waited until the saloon quieted, until even Marie had gone to bed. Then she slipped out the back, the wax key impressions in her pocket, snow beginning to fall like a blessing or a curse. The streets were empty, white-dusted and silent. She made it to the mining office without seeing a soul. The keys she'd had Diego copy worked smooth as butter. Inside, the safe squatted like a toad, black iron and Chicago steel. Her hands shook as she tried the combinations she'd gleaned from watching Clemens. Third try. The tumblers clicked. Inside were ledgers, contracts, and letters enough paper to bury an empire. She grabbed what she could carry, stuffing documents inside her coat. That's when she heard boots on the boardwalk. Sheriff Carnegie's voice, whiskey slurred but recognizable. "Swear I saw someone." Ellie's heart hammered. The window was painted shut. The back door was barred. Only way out was through the sheriff. She pressed against the wall, hand finding the little .32 in her pocket, the one Sally had given her so long ago. The door opened. Carnegie stood backlit by snow, hand on his pistol. Their eyes met across the darkness. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Cole's voice came from behind the sheriff. "Evening, Andrew. Bit late for office work." Carnegie spun, and Ellie moved, not for the door but for the window, throwing her weight against the painted seal. Glass shattered. She tumbled through, documents scattering in the snow, and ran like the devil's hounds were at her heels. Behind her, men shouted. A gun fired, the sound flat in the falling snow. But she knew these alleys now, these shadows. She dodged between buildings, over fences, through spaces a man couldn't follow. By the time she reached the cabin, her lungs burned and her hands bled from the glass. Cole was already there. Jesse wide-eyed beside him. "You're hit," Cole said. And she looked down surprised to see blood on her sleeve. Not a bullet, just a deep cut from the window. He worked quick and gentle, cleaning and binding while she told him what she'd found. "It's all there," she gasped. "Names, dates, amounts. Girls as young as 14 signed into contracts they couldn't read. Water rights stolen from Mexican families. Bribes to the railroad commissioners." Cole's face was stone. "Then we end this." Outside, the storm built into a proper blizzard. They could hear horses on the road, see torches despite the snow. Rockefeller wasn't waiting for morning. The reckoning was coming now. "Get Jesse to the root cellar," Cole said, checking his rifle. "Take the documents. If this goes bad, we stick together." Ellie reloaded the .32 with steady hands. "Jesse, you get to that cellar and don't come out until one of us says—" The boy ran. Cole and Ellie took positions by the windows. The storm screamed around the cabin, but underneath they could hear men approaching. This was it, the line in the sand. The moment when running stopped and standing began. "I'm sorry I got you into this," Ellie said. Cole actually smiled. "I was dead before you came. Just didn't know it yet." He chambered around. "Least now I'm fighting for something worth the trouble." The first shot shattered the front window, and the battle for Dry Gulch began in earnest, with snow and lead flying thick as justice itself come calling. The morning after the shooting, Cole and Ellie faced each other across the kitchen table like strangers. The documents lay between them, water-stained and precious. Outside, Carnegie's men had pulled back at dawn, but they'd be back. The cabin windows were boarded where bullets had found their mark. "We should take these to the federal marshal in Denver," Cole said. his voice carefully neutral. Do this legal-like. Ellie's laugh was sharp as glass. Legal, you think Rockefeller got where he is playing legal? She touched the bandage on her arm where the window had cut deep. By the time we reach Denver, those girls will be scattered to the wind, and any witness worth having will be 6 feet under or bought off. So, what's your plan? Storm his office with guns blazing. Why not? Her eyes blazed. Worked well enough for him. They glared at each other, and suddenly all the unspoken things crowded the space between them. Cole saw her not as she was now fierce and determined, but as she'd been that first night, soaked and defiant and whispering about months without bathing. The woman who'd survived by being harder than the world that tried to break her. You're not that person anymore, he said quietly. Aren't I? Ellie stood abruptly, chair scraping. You don't know what I've done to survive. Cole, the lies I've told, the things I've... She stopped, wrapping arms around herself. Rockefeller's man was right about one thing. I am a runaway. Not from the law, but from worse. I don't care. You should. Her voice went small. That night in Denver, the foreman who cornered me, I hurt him bad. Cole maybe killed him. I don't know. I ran before I could find out. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Cole stood slowly, came around the table. Were you defending yourself? Yes, but... Then I don't care. He caught her shoulders gently. Ellie, I've got my own ghosts. William died because I rushed the blast pattern, trying to beat quota. You think that makes us even? She looked up at him, seeing for the first time how deep his guilt ran. They were both broken people, carrying wounds that wouldn't heal clean. Maybe that's what made them fit 2 damaged pieces that somehow made a whole. I'm scared, she admitted. Not of Rockefeller or Carnegie. Scared that if I stop running, stop fighting, I'll just disappear. Like I never mattered at all. Cole pulled her close, and she let him. You matter, he said into her hair. To me, to Jessie, to those girls counting on someone giving a damn, that's not nothing. They held each other while snow whispered against the boards, sealing out the world. When they finally pulled apart, something had shifted. The decision was made without words. They'd act together or not at all. That night, Jessie crept down from the loft where he'd been ordered to stay. I heard shooting, he said, trying to sound brave. You gonna leave me behind? Ellie knelt before him. Jessie, Tom, you've been brave enough. This isn't your fight. Hell it ain't. The boy's face flushed. Sorry, ma'am, but they beat me 'cause I was watching, 'cause I saw them loading them girls like cattle. His voice cracked. One of them looked just like my sister would have, if she'd lived. Cole and Ellie exchanged glances. The boy had already chosen his side, had paid for it in bruises. Sending him away now would break something in him that might not mend. You do exactly as we say, Cole said finally. No heroics, no taking chances. You're our lookout, nothing more. Jessie nodded so hard his whole body shook. Yes, sir, I can do that. Got eyes like a hawk. Everyone says so. They spent the next 2 days preparing. Cole cleaned and oiled every weapon they had. Ellie transcribed the most damning documents, hiding copies in different places. Jessie ran messages to Diego and Marie, building their small alliance. The plan came together piece by piece. The Harvest Festival was coming 3 nights of music and drinking, when the whole town would be either celebrating or drunk or both. Rockefeller always made a speech from the mining office balcony, talking about prosperity and progress while his men handed out free beer to keep the crowd happy. He'll have the safe open that night. Samuel Clemens had told Ellie in his last drunken ramble. Pays the festival vendors in cash, makes a show of it. Man loves his moments of glory. But it was what Jessie learned that changed everything. Racing back from town, he'd nearly run into Ellie. Miss Marie says to tell you the girls are still at the camp, all of them. Rockefeller's planning to move them during the festival when everyone's distracted. Move them where? Cole asked. South, Mexico, maybe somewhere out of U.S. jurisdiction. Jesse's young face was grave. We gotta stop them. The moral clarity of it hit like cold water. Documents could wait. Buildings could burn. But those girls some Jesse's age, they couldn't wait for legal niceties or careful plans. Then we need a distraction, Ellie said. Something big enough to pull his men away from the camp. Cole's smile was grim. I might know something about creating distractions. He still had dynamite from his mining days, stored careful in the root cellar. Not much, but enough. The trick was placing it right not to kill, but to confuse, to scatter attention like startled quail. The dam, Diego suggested when they met in his smithy. They're terrified it'll break. A few charges near the base. Nothing structural, just enough to make them panic. That's federal property now, Cole warned. We do this. There's no going back. There never was, Marie said firmly. She'd brought 2 other women, Florence Nightingale, who ran the boarding house, and Clara Barton, the midwife. Those girls could be our daughters. Were our daughters. Some of them. The festival arrived with autumn moon and fiddle music. The town filled with ranch families and traveling merchants. Everyone eager to forget the hard year in a few nights of dancing. Rockefeller held court like a king, buying arounds and slapping backs. As darkness fell, their ragtag army split up. Diego and the women headed for the mining camp with a wagon and weapons. Jesse took position on the hotel roof with a mirror for signaling. Cole and Ellie made for the dam. The site was lightly guarded, 2 men playing cards by a fire, rifles leaning against their chairs. They never heard Cole coming. He moved like smoke. Skills learned tracking cattle serving darker purpose. Both guards dropped unconscious, trussed like calves before they could cry out. Ellie kept watch while Cole placed the charges. His hands were steady now, no tremor of doubt. William, he whispered as he worked. This one's for both of us. The explosions, when they came, lit the sky like judgment. Not enough to break the dam, but enough to send water spouting through calculated cracks. The guard's fire went out in a hiss of steam. In town, the music stopped. Men shouted, horses whinnied. The dam! Someone screamed. The dam's breaking! Rockefeller's voice roared over the panic, sending every available man to the river. In the confusion, no one noticed the wagon heading for the mining camp, or the women with rifles who knew how to use them. Ellie and Cole reached the camp as Diego was breaking down the gate. The guards had run for town at the first explosion, leaving only a handful to watch the prisoners. Marie's group had already taken care of them. Florence had a wicked hand with a frying pan. The girls huddled in a converted barn, chains on their ankles like something from before the war. Ellie's vision went red. She'd known it was bad, but this was evil wearing a business suit. Get them out, she ordered, voice steady despite her rage. Cut the chains, load the wagon, go! While the others worked, Cole kept watch and Ellie searched the overseer's office. More documents, more evidence, but also something else. A photograph of Rockefeller with railroad executives, all smiling over a map that showed planned routes through Mexican territory. Ellie, Jesse's voice, high and scared. Riders coming. They'd run out of time. The wagon was loaded but moving slow. Too much weight for the horses. Cole made the choice without hesitation. Take them to the church, he told Diego. Father Miguel will hide them. Go! He and Ellie turned back toward the approaching riders, weapons ready, but it wasn't Rockefeller's men. It was townsfolk, led by Mrs. Hightower and the banker Alexander Hamilton. We heard the girls were here, Martha Hightower said, chin high despite her fear. Came to help. Behind her, more townspeople emerged from darkness. Not everyone, maybe a dozen, but enough. They'd chosen their side at last. Form a line, Cole commanded. Anyone tries to stop that wagon? Hoofbeats thundered close. Rockefeller himself led the charge, Carnegie beside him. They pulled up short, seeing the armed townspeople. In the distance, the dam still leaked but held. The explosions had been sound and fury. Nothing more. "You're all under arrest," Carnegie shouted. "Destruction of federal property. Kidnapping." "Kidnapping," Marie stepped forward. "These girls were prisoners. We have proof." She held up the contracts, the chains. "Unless you want to explain to a federal judge why you were keeping American citizens in irons." The standoff stretched taut. Then Rockefeller smiled, cold as winter moon. "Burn it all," he told his men. "No evidence, no crime." But Alexander Hamilton, quiet banker who'd never raised his voice in 30 years, spoke up. "Already sent copies to Denver. Silas registered mail this morning. Figured something like this might happen." The silence was beautiful. Rockefeller's face went through several colors before settling on ash. Carnegie's hand fell away from his gun. In the distance, church bells began to ring Father Miguel announcing sanctuary for anyone who needed it. "This isn't over," Rockefeller snarled. "No," Ellie agreed, stepping into torchlight so he could see her clear. "It's just beginning. Every girl you hurt, every family you cheated, every drop of water you stole, we have it all written down. And come morning, so will the federal marshal." The standoff broke like a fever. Rockefeller wheeled his horse, spurring hard toward town. His men followed, leaving Carnegie standing alone. The sheriff looked at the armed townspeople, at the documents in Marie's hands, at his own future crumbling. "I'll be at my office," he said quietly. "Anyone wants to arrest me, they'll find me there." He walked away, a broken man who'd chosen the wrong master. As dawn broke over Dry Gulch, the rescued girls were safe in the church, wrapped in blankets and hope. The town was divided but alive with possibility. And on a hill overlooking it all, Cole and Ellie stood together, exhausted but unbroken. "We did it," Ellie said, wonder in her voice. "We started it," Cole corrected. "The finishing will take time." She leaned into him, feeling his solid warmth. "I've got time now. We both do." Jesse ran up the hill, whooping like the child he still was. Did you see how they ran? We're heroes?" "No," Cole said, ruffling the boy's hair. "We're just people who got tired of looking away." But Ellie heard what he didn't say that sometimes. That's the only kind of hero that matters. The kind who stands up not because they're brave or pure or special, but because standing is better than kneeling, and together is stronger than alone. The sun rose full, painting the desert gold and red. Somewhere below, Rockefeller was probably planning his counterattack. There would be lawyers and threats, bought judges and long fights ahead. But for now, in this moment, they'd won something precious, the right to fight another day, and the knowledge that they wouldn't fight alone. The harvest festivals last night arrived with banners strung between buildings and the smell of roasted corn filling the air. But beneath the celebrations, tension coiled tight as a watch spring. Rockefeller had been too quiet since the rescue, and quiet men were dangerous men in the territories. Ellie slipped through the crowd, her plain dress helping her blend with the ranch wives and town women. The documents were hidden in 3 places now, one set with Alexander Hamilton at the bank, another with Father Miguel, and the original sewn into her corset stays. She'd learned never to trust just one hiding spot. The mining office squatted at the street's end, windows blazing with lamplight. Rockefeller was making his show of prosperity, paying vendors with flourish while his remaining men stood guard. Sheriff Carnegie was nowhere to be seen. Some said he'd left town, others that he was drinking himself to death in his office. Cole worked the other side of the street with Diego, keeping watch while trying to look like they were enjoying the festival. Jesse perched on the hotel balcony, his job to whistle if trouble came from unexpected directions. Inside the Clementine, Marie coordinated with the women. They'd formed what Florence Nightingale called a mutual protection society, armed women who took turns watching over the rescued girls and each other. Some folks muttered about women carrying guns, but after seeing those chains, most understood. "He's planning something," Clara Barton said, her midwife's instincts reading the crowd like signs of labor. Too many of his men near the stage. She was right, as Rockefeller took the platform for his traditional speech. Ellie noticed how his men had positioned themselves, cutting off exits, hands near weapons, her blood chilled. My friends, Rockefeller began, his voice carrying over the square. These have been difficult days. Lies have been spread about our company's employment practices. Agitators have destroyed property and stolen from honest businesses. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded, others looked skeptical. The town was split, old loyalties warring with new knowledge. But I come with good news. Rockefeller smiled wide. The railroad has approved new investment. More jobs, more prosperity for those who stand with progress instead of chaos. He signaled, and his men started handing out not just beer but envelopes, cash money. More than most had seen at once. The message was clear: stand with Rockefeller and eat, stand against him and starve. Ellie felt the crowd wavering. Money talked louder than morality when children needed feeding. She pushed forward, but rough hands grabbed her arms. Dutch Vanderbilt, Rockefeller's enforcer, grinned down at her. Boss wants a word, he said, dragging her toward the office. Cole started forward but found a gun in his ribs. More of Rockefeller's men had materialized, surrounding him and Diego. Up on the balcony, Jesse whistled sharp, but there was nowhere to run. Inside the mining office, Rockefeller waited like a spider in his web. The safe stood open. Stacks of money visible, but also something else. Dynamite, enough to level the building and anyone in it. Miss Quinn, he said pleasantly. Or should I say Miss Roosevelt? Yes, I know who you are. The foreman you attacked in Denver, he was my cousin. Ellie's heart hammered, but she kept her face steady. Then you know he got what he deserved. Perhaps, but that's not why you're here. He gestured to a table where papers lay waiting. You're going to sign a confession. Admit you forged those documents, that you coerced those girls to lie. In exchange, you and your friends leave Colorado tonight. Refuse. He touched the dynamite meaningfully. You'd blow up your own office. And blame anarchists. Your bodies in the wreckage would prove the story. His smile never wavered. The railroad needs this water route. Miss Roosevelt. You're an inconvenience. Nothing more. Outside, Cole tested his captor's grip, calculating odds. The festival noise would cover a scuffle, but not gunshots, and Ellie was in that building with a madman. Then he heard singing, women's voices growing stronger. Marie led them, the rescued girls and their protectors. Marching down Main Street, they sang Amazing Grace, but they carried rifles. The crowd parted, unsure what to do. Some of Rockefeller's men turned, confused. That moment of distraction was all Cole needed. He drove an elbow back, twisted free, and Diego moved with him. The fight was brief, and brutal ranch work built different strength than gun work. The office, Cole shouted to Marie. He's got Ellie. But Ellie had her own plans. As Rockefeller reached for the match to light his threat, she grabbed the ink pot from his desk and flung it in his face. Blind and cursing, he stumbled back. She dove for the dynamite, gathering the sticks like deadly kindling. Rockefeller clawed at his eyes, screaming for his men. But the singing outside had become something else, the sound of a town deciding. Alexander Hamilton's voice rose above the rest. Enough, we've had enough. Dutch burst through the door just as Ellie reached the window. No time for games. She clutched the dynamite and jumped. 2 stories onto festival bunting wasn't pleasant, but better than bullets. She landed hard, dynamite scattering, and rolled to see Dutch raising his gun. Cole's shot took Dutch in the shoulder, spinning him back inside. More shots erupted as Rockefeller's men faced an armed crowd that had finally found its backbone. But this wasn't a massacre. It was citizens arresting criminals, even if some criminals wore badges. Stop! Father Miguel's voice boomed like Moses himself. No more blood, we are not them. The shooting stuttered to a halt. in the strange silence that followed. Ellie gathered the dynamite sticks, each one feeling heavier than the last. Cole reached her side, checking for injuries with hands that shook slightly. "I'm all right," she said, though her ankles screamed otherwise. "The dynamite. Give it here." Diego appeared with a bucket of water, and they drowned the fuses one by one. Each hiss of dying wick felt like a small victory. Rockefeller emerged from his office, ink-stained and defiant. "You think this matters? I own judges, governors. And we own the truth." Alexander Hamilton interrupted. "Every document, every testimony, already sent to newspapers in Denver, San Francisco, even New York." The banker looked older but stood taller. "Your railroad friends might protect you from prison, but not from publicity." It was true. Marie had spent the afternoon at the telegraph office, sending story after story to any paper that would listen. The age of information had come to the frontier, and secrets couldn't hide in the desert anymore. Sheriff Carnegie chose that moment to appear, badge gone but wearing a federal marshal's deputization. "Silas Rockefeller, you're under arrest for violation of the 13th Amendment. Slavery's been illegal for near 30 years, in case you forgot." "You can't," Rockefeller started. "I can," wired for federal authority this morning." Carnegie looked tired but resolved. "Figured if I was going to jail, might as well be for doing right instead of wrong." They took Rockefeller away in chains, the same type he'd used on those girls. Poetic justice. Some called it, others just called it justice. Period. As dawn approached, the festival had become something else. A town meeting that lasted till sunrise. Decisions were made by exhausted voices. A water committee formed with Diego as head. A fund established for the rescued girls. Repairs planned for the dam with proper safety measures. Cole and Ellie sat on the church steps, watching it all unfold. Jessie had fallen asleep against Ellie's shoulder, worn out from playing hero. Her ankle was wrapped and throbbing, but she'd refused to leave until everything was settled. "We did it," she said again, still not quite believing. "You did it," Cole corrected. "That jump with the dynamite was stupid, I know." She laughed, then winced as it jarred her injuries. "But it worked." "Your whole life's been stupid things that worked, hasn't it?" She considered that. "Maybe, but this time I wasn't running away. I was running toward something." "Toward what?" She looked at him, this quiet man who'd found his courage, who'd chosen standing over safety. Then she looked at the town, battered but not broken, finally taking responsibility for its own future. Jesse mumbled in his sleep, something about catching bad guys. "Home?" she said simply. "I was running toward home." Cole's arm came around her, careful of her injuries. "Reckon you found it." "Reckon I did." The sun rose over Dry Gulch, painting the mountains gold and purple. Somewhere, lawyers would argue and railroad men would scheme. There would be trials and setbacks, victories and defeats. The water rights would take years to fully sort out, and some of Rockefeller's men had escaped to cause trouble another day. But for now, in this moment, a town had remembered its conscience. People who'd been divided found common ground in protecting the vulnerable, and two broken souls discovered that together. They made something whole and strong. The West was still hard, still unforgiving, but it was also still theirs, not owned by rich men in distant cities, but by the people who worked its soil and faced its storms. And that, Ellie thought as she leaned into Cole's warmth, was worth every stupid, dangerous thing she'd done to help secure it. "What now?" Cole asked. "Now," Ellie smiled. "Now we build something worth keeping." And as the town stirred to life around them, as rescued girls emerged from the church to see their first free dawn, as neighbors began the hard work of forgiveness and rebuilding, it seemed they already had. The courthouse in Durango stood like a monument to justice, all red brick and high windows that caught the morning sun. 3 weeks had passed since the festival night, and now came the reckoning. Ellie adjusted her best dress borrowed from Marie and tried not to fidget as they waited to testify. The federal prosecutor, a sharp man named Theodore Parker, had arrived with enough paperwork to choke a mule. He'd spent days taking depositions, gathering evidence, building a case that even Rockefeller's money couldn't wash away. "Remember," Parker told them before entering, "just tell the truth. The documents speak for themselves, but your testimony makes them real." Inside, the courtroom was packed. Ranchers, townspeople, even folks from neighboring settlements had come to see justice done or perverted, depending on their loyalties. Rockefeller sat with 3 lawyers from Denver, looking confident despite the chains on his wrists. Judge Catherine Stanton presided, one of the few female judges in the territories, appointed by folks who figured a woman might understand certain crimes better. She had eyes like winter steel and a voice that brooked no nonsense. The rescued girls testified first, behind a screen for privacy. Their voices shook but held steady as they described the deception, the debts that multiplied like locusts, the chains. One girl, barely 15, explained how she'd been told she was signing for restaurant work. "They said I'd be serving food," she whispered. "Just serving food." Rockefeller's lawyer, Benedict Arnold, and wasn't that a name for the profession, tried to tear their stories apart, but Alexander Hamilton had done his work well. Every contract, every fraudulent entry, every bribed official was documented and verified. When Ellie took the stand, Benedict focused on her past. "Isn't it true, Miss Roosevelt, that you're wanted in Denver for assault?" "I defended myself," Ellie said clearly. "Same as these girls were trying to do." "By attacking a foreman, perhaps killing him." Theodore Parker stood. "Objection. Miss Roosevelt isn't on trial here." "Goes to credibility," Benedict argued. Judge Stanton considered. "I'll allow it, but tread carefully, Counselor." Ellie lifted her chin. "That foreman cornered me in an alley after I refused his advances. I hit him with a bottle and ran. If that killed him, it was his own evil that brought it on." "So you admit to violence when things don't go your way?" "I admit to surviving." Her voice rang clear. "Same as any creature will fight when cornered. The difference is, I was fighting just for myself. This time, we fought for those who couldn't." The courtroom murmured approval. Benedict tried more angles, but Ellie held firm. She'd been cross-examined by harder men than him. Hunger, cold, and fear were tougher prosecutors than any lawyer. Cole testified next, explaining the explosives at the dam. "Controlled blasts," he said. "Enough to scare, not enough to break. I spent 5 years setting charges in mines. I know the difference." "You endangered federal property," Benedict accused. "I prevented murder." Cole replied. "Rockefeller was ready to blow up his own office with Miss Roosevelt inside. Which crime weighs heavier?" Sheriff Carnegie's testimony proved most damning. Seeking redemption, he laid out the whole corrupt system: bribes, threats, false arrests. He produced his own records, showing payments from Rockefeller for looking the other way. "I was a coward," Carnegie said simply, "but I kept records, thinking maybe someday." Well, someday came. The trial stretched 3 days. Witnesses poured in: Diego describing the stolen water rights, Marie detailing the girls she'd tried to help, Father Miguel confirming sanctuary laws were invoked. Even Mrs. Hightower testified, admitting she'd been wrong to fire Ellie. "Fear makes cowards of us all," she said. "But seeing those young ones in chains, there's fear, and then there's evil. I chose wrong at first. I'm trying to choose right now." On the final day, Rockefeller himself took the stand. His lawyers had advised against it. But pride wouldn't let him sit silent. He painted himself as a visionary bringing prosperity to backward communities, claimed the girls had signed contracts willingly, that water rights were purchased fairly. "These people," he gestured dismissively at the packed courtroom, "resist progress. They'd rather scratch in the dirt than embrace the future." Theodore Parker's cross-examination was surgical, document by document. He exposed the lies, the forged signatures, the altered contracts, the water deeds from men who'd died before signing. By the end, Rockefeller's face had gone from confident to cornered. "Aunts, one last question." Parker said, "Those chains we've found, what legitimate business requires chaining workers?" "They were prone to wandering." Rockefeller muttered, "For their own safety." "Safety." Parker held up a length of chain. Let it rattle. "Like animals need safety from freedom." The jury, 6 men and 6 women. Another progressive touch, deliberated for 2 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood tall. "Guilty on all counts." The courtroom erupted. Some cheered, others cursed. Judge Stanton gavelled for order, then pronounced sentence 20 years federal prison, forfeiture of all illegal gains, and lifetime banishment from water rights ownership. Rockefeller aged 10 years in 10 seconds. As marshals led him away, he turned to Ellie with pure venom. "This isn't over. I have friends." "So do we," she replied calmly. "The difference is, ours came free of charge." Outside the courthouse, the crowd spilled into sunshine. The rescued girls wept with relief, some already making plans to return home or start fresh. Marie organized a celebration at the Clementine, but Ellie found herself needing air. She walked to the edge of town, where Cole waited with the horses. He'd never been comfortable with crowds, and she'd known she'd find him here. Jessie sat on a fence post, whittling with the knife Cole had given him. "It's done," she said. "The trial, maybe. The rest'll take time." Cole helped her mount, careful of her still tender ankle. "Water committee meets tomorrow. They want me to help design the new dam, one that shares instead of steals." "And you said—" "Said I'd think on it." He swung up on his own horse. "Depends on whether we're staying." They rode in comfortable silence. Jessie chattering about the trial, the town, the future. The boy had been officially made their ward papers filed proper and legal. He'd have schooling, stability, something neither Cole nor Ellie had managed for themselves at his age. Back in Dry Gulch, changes were already visible. A new well was being dug in the Mexican Quarter, funded by Rockefeller's seized assets. The abandoned mining camp was being converted to a school. Water flowed in irrigation ditches that had been dry for years. But the biggest change was in the people. Neighbors who'd avoided each other now worked side by side. Women who'd been dismissed as just wives now carried authority in the protection society. Even the saloon girls walked taller, knowing the law finally recognized their humanity. That evening, Ellie stood where her dream would rise, a lot near Main Street, purchased with her trial witness fee. "Ada's bathhouse and laundry," she said, testing the words. "First in Dry Gulch to offer hot water and dignity in equal measure." "I can start the framing next week," Cole offered. "Jessie's good with a hammer now." "I can paint the sign," Jessie added eagerly. "Miss Clara's been teaching me letters real good." Ellie smiled at her makeshift family. "Then I guess we're staying." That night, there was dancing at the Clementine. Not the wild abandon of festival time, but something better, the steady joy of people who'd faced down giants and won. Diego played his guitar. Florence led reels, and even Alexander Hamilton was spotted attempting a waltz. Cole and Ellie stepped outside for air, finding a quiet spot under the stars. The desert spread endless around them, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like possibility. "No regrets?" Cole asked. Ellie considered. In a few months, she'd gone from rootless to rooted, from alone to partnered, from running to standing ground. She'd made enemies of powerful men and allies of ordinary folks. She'd broken laws and helped write new ones. "None," she said firmly. "You." He pulled her close, mindful of proprieties but needing the contact. "Only that it took a storm to bring you to my door." Maybe that's what it took, for both of us. They stood together, watching the town they'd helped save continue its celebration. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, appeals to fight, water systems to build, a business to establish. a boy to raise. The railroad wouldn't give up easy. And there were other Rockefellers out there, other chains to break. But tonight, they'd won something precious, the right to try. To build instead of tear down. To stay instead of run. To choose their own fate instead of having it chosen for them. "You know what Jesse asked me today?" Cole said. "Asked if he could call us Ma and Pa." Ellie's breath caught. "What did you say?" "Said he'd have to ask you about the Ma part." She thought about the bitter girl she'd been, convinced she'd never be clean enough for decent folks. Thought about the broken man Cole had been, hiding from the world in his cabin. Now here they stood, guardians and builders, pillars of a community that had almost lost its way. "Tell him yes," she said, "to both parts." Cole's smile was answer enough. Inside the saloon, someone started singing not hymns this time, but the Battle Hymn of the Republic, with new words about water and justice. Voices joined in, growing stronger, until the whole building shook with it. The West was changing, not all at once, not without pain, but changing nonetheless, and in one small town beneath endless stars. Two people who'd thought themselves beyond redemption discovered that sometimes the best way to wash yourself clean is to help others do the same. Tomorrow could bring its troubles. Tonight, they were home. Dawn broke gentle over the valley, painting the mountains pink and gold like a promise kept. 6 months had passed since the trial, and Dry Gulch had transformed from a town divided to a community united. Ellie stood in the doorway of her bathhouse, breathing in the steam-sweet air of success. "First customers will be here soon," she called to Jesse, who was already stoking the boilers. The boy, though he was shooting up so fast she'd need to stop calling him, that had taken to the work like he was born to it. "Yes, Ma got the fires going good and hot." His voice cracked on hot, and he flushed red as the coals. The bathhouse was Cole's finest work-solid pine construction, with copper fixtures Diego had crafted with artists' hands. 8 private bathing rooms, a communal washing area, and something revolutionary, a reading corner with books and newspapers for anyone waiting their turn. The opening day crowd surprised everyone, not just the expected customers, miners' wives and working women, but ranchers' wives from the valley. Even some proper ladies who'd previously sent their washing to Denver, clean water and dignity. It turned out, crossed all social lines. "Never thought I'd see the day," Martha Hightower said, settling into a tub with a grateful sigh. "Hot water whenever we want it. Feels like civilization's finally found us." Marie Curie Doucet had brought her girls from the Clementine, insisting they'd be regular customers. "My ladies deserve the same comforts as anyone," she'd said, daring anyone to object. None did. The town had learned to see beyond old prejudices. By noon, the place was bustling. Clara Barton had set up an informal clinic in one corner, offering basic health advice to women who'd never seen a doctor. Florence Nightingale organized a rotation system so no one waited too long. Even the rescued girls, those who'd stayed to build new lives, came to wash away more than just dirt. Cole arrived at midday with news from the Water Committee. "New dams approved," he said, blueprints tucked under his arm. "Construction starts next month. Fair distribution, elected oversight, and," he smiled, "wages for all workers, paid weekly in cash." "No company scrip?" Ellie asked. "No company anything. This'll be the town's dam, built by the town, for the town." It was more than infrastructure. It was redemption, proof that people could choose cooperation over exploitation. The federal government had even sent an engineer to consult, impressed by what they'd heard of Dry Gulch's transformation. That evening, they held the wedding folks had been expecting for months. Nothing fancy, Ellie had insisted on simple, but the whole town turned out anyway. Father Miguel performed the ceremony in the church garden, with roses blooming despite the desert heat. Ellie wore her mother's dress, altered by Clara's clever fingers. Cole stood straight and proud in his one good suit, Jesse beside him as best man, trying not to fidget with the rings. Marie stood as Ellie's witness, tears streaming down her painted cheeks. "Do you, Eleanor Roosevelt Quinn, take this man?" "I do," she said before Father Miguel could finish, earning laughter from the crowd. She'd waited long enough for this moment, for this man who'd seen her at her worst and chosen to stay. "And do you, Thomas Edison Mercer?" "Every day for the rest of my life," Cole answered, his voice carrying across the garden. When they kissed, it wasn't the desperate hunger of that first storm-driven moment. This was deeper, surer, a promise sealed with full understanding of what they'd built together. The celebration lasted until stars claimed the sky. Diego played his guitar while couples danced on the packed earth. Alexander Hamilton, now head of the town council, made a speech about community and courage that had folks wiping their eyes, even Sheriff Carnegie, working toward redemption one honest day at a time, raised a toast to the couple. "To finding your way home," he said simply, and everyone understood he meant more than geography. Jesse gave his own speech, short but heartfelt. "They saved me when I had nobody. Now I got a ma who teaches me letters and a PA who shows me how to build things proper. That's all I wanted to say. Except," he grinned, "the cake better be chocolate." It was 3 layers of it, baked by the combined efforts of every decent cook in town. As Ellie and Cole cut it together, she whispered the old joke between them, "Still think I need a bath?" "Every day," he whispered back. "Good thing you own a bathhouse now." They laughed, and if anyone wondered why, they kept it to themselves. Some things were just for the two of them, private jokes that had grown into private joys. As the evening wound down, couples drifted away to their homes, children asleep in their parents' arms. The Chinese families from the laundry district had come too, bringing paper lanterns that now bobbed in the gentle breeze. The Mexican guitarists played soft serenades. The whole town felt woven together, threads of different colors making one strong fabric. "Look at that," Marie said, gesturing at the mixed crowd. 6 months ago, half these folks wouldn't speak to the other half. Now look at them." "Crisis has a way of showing what matters," Father Miguel observed. "Sometimes we need the darkness to appreciate the light." Ellie found a quiet moment to stand alone, looking out at the town spread below. The new streetlights, another improvement from the seized assets, showed clean streets, painted buildings, hope made visible. In the distance, the river ran free, no longer strangled by greed. Cole found her there, arms sliding around her waist. "No second thoughts. About marrying a man who talks to dynamite and builds furniture for babies that don't exist yet." She leaned back against him. "Not a one." "Yet," he repeated softly. "That's a word with hope in it." She turned in his arms. "You thinking of expanding the family beyond Jesse?" "I'm thinking we've got a home now. Steady work, clean water, a town that'll help raise any children we're blessed with." He touched her cheek gently. "I'm thinking we've earned the right to hope for whatever comes next." The future stretched before them. Not easy, but possible. There'd be challenges. The railroad was appealing the verdict, and other towns had their own Rockefellers to face. But Dry Gulch had become a beacon, proof that ordinary people could stand up to extraordinary greed and win. Letters came daily now, from communities facing similar struggles. "How did you do it?" they asked. "How did you unite your town?" Ellie and Cole answered them all, sharing documents, strategies, and most importantly, encouragement. Change was possible. It just took courage and cooperation. The bathhouse expanded within 2 months, adding a laundry service that employed 6 women at fair wages. Cole's construction crew grew too, taking on men who'd been blacklisted from the mines for union talk. Jesse started a newspaper, the Dry Gulch Truth, with a hand press Alexander Hamilton donated. "First issues about the Water Committee elections," Jesse announced proudly. "Got interviews and everything." The boy who'd begged for work was becoming a young man with purpose. Ellie watched him set type, remembering her own desperate youth. This was what they'd fought for, the chance for the next generation to build instead of just survive. 1 year after that fateful storm, they held a celebration at the dam site. The new structure rose elegant and functional, with gates that could be adjusted for each community's needs. No more water hoarding, no more dried fields while others drowned in excess. "We should put up a marker," someone suggested, "something to remember how we got here." After much debate, they settled on simple words carved in local stone. "Water is life, share it freely. Remember the chains break them always." As the sun set on the celebration, Ellie and Cole walked home hand in hand, Jesse running ahead to light the lamps. Their cabin had grown 2 additional rooms for a growing boy and maybe, hopefully, other children to come. The garden produced vegetables now, the chickens laid regular, and peace sat on the place like a benediction. "You know what I love most about evening?" Ellie asked. "What's that?" "Knowing we'll wake up in the same place tomorrow. No running, no looking over shoulders. Just tomorrow, waiting for us to build something in it." Cole squeezed her hand. "We've come a long way from that storm." "No," she corrected. "That storm brought us exactly where we needed to be." Inside their home, Jesse had laid out the evening meal, simple fare, but plenty of it. They sat together, a family forged by choice rather than blood, and gave thanks for full bellies and fuller hearts. Outside, Dry Gulch settled into peaceful evening. The bathhouse windows glowed warm, the last customers enjoying the luxury of cleanliness. The river sang its ancient song, flowing free to all who needed it. And somewhere in the desert, a coyote called to its mate, wild still, but part of a larger harmony. The West would always be hard. That was its nature and its challenge. But it no longer had to be cruel. In one small town, people had proved that civilization meant more than buildings and railways. It meant choosing to see the humanity in each other, especially in those who'd been denied it before. And in a cabin on the hillside, 3 souls who'd each been lost in their own way finally rested easy, knowing they were exactly where they belonged, home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to hear where you're enjoying this tale, whether you're driving through the countryside, relaxing at home, or perhaps even somewhere in the American West where these events unfolded. Please share your thoughts and location in the comments below so we can connect and discuss this journey together. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850 and hit that like button. And don't forget to press the hype button to help more people discover this story. Your support means the world and helps keep these tales of the Old West alive. Until next time, partners.